I am excited to say that we are going to take a look at 4x20 and 60 comments. Both of these are observational rubric-based tools that you can find, of course, in iWalkObservation, and we will take a look at how to customize those as well as how to use them in the classroom setting. Now, before we do, let's take a quick look at the webinar. The screen I just threw up shows you two windows that you can optionally pull up. They are at the bottom of your screen. If you take a look here at the bottom bar of your screen, I've just put an image on top of it. You have a chat, a raise the hand, and a Q&A. So of course, if you have a question at any time during this presentation, please type it out, put it in there. If you want to get my attention, you can raise my hand or raise your hand. Just know that that's a small dialog box that appears in the upper left-hand corner or right-hand corner of my screen, and sometimes I don't catch it. The other thing, of course, you can do is you can chat. You can chat with the whole group by pulling up your chat panel, selecting all panelists, and have a chat conversation, a little side talk while the presentation happens, or you can chat with individual people if you have individual folks that you know of that are online. All right, so let's get started. I apologize that I have a little bit of a cold. I'll try not to sniffle my way through this. All right, so here we are with iWalkObservation. And like I said, today we're going to take a look at the 4x20 and the targeted comments. Now, both of these are rubric-based tools, meaning that they're intended to be used for observational rubrics. And if you have tried to dive into either one of these tools, you'll note that they don't really, there's nothing there, they're empty until you fill them. And so we're going to take a look at both what they look like when they're filled and also how to put in your rubric data into the two tools. So let's take a look first at the premise. The 4x20 tool gives you 4 categories, and in each category you have up to 20 look-fors. Now, I've already populated mine with a framework for teaching, which is a rubric based here out of Portland Public Schools, based off of Charlotte Danielson's work. And so what you'll see is the minute I select the look-for title or tool that I want to use, which implies that you can have multiple of these, which we will look at later. 4 buttons popped up, and these are my 4 categories, if you will. And each one of these categories, planning, prep, and curriculum, have up to 20 individual look-fors. Here's a category on environment and student management, instruction and assessment, and professional responsibilities. I also have a comment field where I can take my comments as I observe. And the way the 4x20 works is the idea here is that I'm walking into the classroom and I'm noting what standards, what components of each evaluative topic are being observed. Now note that in this observation or in this tool, I'm not immediately necessarily marking whether or not the observation is good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just marking whether or not I have seen evidence of that standard. And so let's say, oh, sure enough, there's some learning activities and the lesson and the unit has some structure, there was some good clarity. As I look around the classroom, I can see that the teachers themselves understand the importance of the concept, and there's a management of instructional groups. Now, while I'm marking up some of those standards, I, of course, might also be taking some narrative notes. Now, the I'll get back to the configuration in a moment, I'm sorry. The difference between the 4x20, and let's go back, and the targeted comments. So remember that just what we just saw in the 4x20 is that we have 4 categories and 20 comments per category. In the targeted comments, we do it a little bit differently. Each category in and of itself is going to be a list. And when I click on that list, my up to 20 standards will be shown. And you'll notice that that's in elements 0 through 10, elements 11 through 20. And that's simply so that each page fits nicely on my iPad screen or my computer screen. The difference between 4x20 and 60 comments is that 60 comments directly connects a one-to-one between the target and the comment. And so as you'll notice here, let's say I go in and I select planning and prep, and I see that there are some learning activities. The minute I click on the learning activities, I now have a comment box where I can narrate and give my comments exactly precisely for that targeted element. Okay? Again, if any questions have come up, please make sure you put those into the Q&A. So let me show you again one more time, because these have both been loaded with the same data set, but there's a nuance in the way the observational tool would be used in the classroom. On the 4x20, I can put in my rubric, and I have up to 4 categories per set, and each category, or if we talk with Danielson's language, each domain would have up to 20 elements. My comments is one complete narrative field, whereas with targeted comments, I would select my target. Perhaps I'm walking into a classroom and I really want to zoom in and focus in on the environment and the student management. And both of my, my elements will be on separate pages. Elements 1 through 10 and elements 11 through 20. Again, with targeted comments, the idea is that the comment is targeted specifically for the element that is being represented. Okay, so instead of one giant narrative field, I am truly targeting in or focusing in on my elements, trying to provide evidence as well as feedback that is directly focused on that element. Now my comments box, I do have a comments box in targeted comments, so I can continue to do narrative if I'd like. And I always like to point out that up in the upper right-hand corner of every comment box is a timestamp. So as you're typing along, you can also enter in a timestamp, which will automatically place a time marker so that you're able to come back to that comment later in the lesson when you're reviewing that data with the teachers. All right, so 4x20 and targeted comments is honestly actually no good if you don't put in some type of data, because your rubrics have to fill this, these tools up. These tools come to you blank, and when they do, if you were to click on them, you would notice that, sorry, somebody just threw up a question, and I'll get there in just a moment. But if you did try to use your 4x20 or your targeted comments right now, it's simply going to tell you that you have no observational data in there and that you need to create it first. There was a question if I would be able to share your configurations, and I believe that is actually for somebody here locally. The answer is yes, I can. I'm not actually sharing them to you. One of your colleagues in Portland Public has done it, and I can tell you how to share that. It was John Horn from a number of years ago who created that sharing file. So let's take a look at how you add your rubric into 4x20 and targeted comments. Of course, we can go into the config system of iWalkObservation, and now we have all sorts of configuration links. The 4x20 and the targeted comments are right here. Let's take a look first at 4x20. When we start up with 4x20, we want to add a list. We currently have one list, and that's the one that I was just working off of. But let's go ahead and add another one. And I'm going to call this one, let's do ESOL, or better yet, I've got a 21st century. I'm going to call this one the 21st century. The reason why I'm going to do that is because right before this seminar, I went online, I did a Google search for some rubrics, and I came up with quite a few, but this was one of them that I thought we would take a look at. So this is a rubric that I just grabbed right offline off of Alberta, Canada, I believe it was. But it's evidence of learning in the 21st century classroom. So let's say that this is my rubric, and this is the rubric that I want to fill here in iWalkObservation. So I gave it a name, 21st century. Email intro is automatic, and now I'm going to label my 4 topics. Well, we're just going to take it off the top, these top 2. We're just going to do 2 of them. So my first topic would be task is authentic. And the second one is task produces deep understanding. Now, again, I'm not endorsing these rubrics. I grabbed them just straight off of a Google search, just as something to demonstrate with you. All right, so I would go ahead and put in my topics, and you notice the minute I did, my topic icons come up here. Click on task is authentic, and now I have 20 targets or elements. The easiest way to do this, right, would be if you have a Word or a PDF document, is simply to highlight those, bring it over, and paste them in. So we're going to do that for a few of them. Let's say just for 4. And as you notice with this rubric, the way it works is rather than doing such as something like developing proficient atop the scale, it just uses a standard sliding scale at the very top, showing that all of these elements should be present in a classroom. But of course, with the increase comes the increase of rigor and support for students. Okay, so there's, we've just added in 4 for task is authentic. Now let's go to a task produces deep understanding. I'd come down to the next one and do the same thing. Perhaps I'm just going to grab a few of these targets and for a demonstration. One more. Put it in the wrong spot, but that's okay. I can easily take it back out, put it in the right spot, and there we go. Okay, so again, I created a new one, added, gave it a name of 21st century. I added in 2 topics coming off of our paper rubric. And from there, added in each one of, added in the targets themselves. So let's take a look at what this now looks like inside iWalkObservation. If I go back to the main page of iWalkObservation and go to the 4x20 look fors, I would of course select my teacher, and then I would select a look for list. And now you see I have 2 look for lists, the framework, which is the one I showed you at the very, very beginning, and the 21st century, which is the one we just created. When I go there, here are my 2 topics, and here are my elements. Okay. Again, 4x20 is not an immediate comment on whether or not the teacher is doing poorly or advanced in the target itself, but rather it is a tool that is intended to mark the presence of and evidence of an element in your teacher rubric. Your narrative comments, of course, will flush out that for the teacher. Now, let's take a look at targeted comments, and let's take a look at how to create those. In targeted comments, we're going to, again, any type of customization that we do with iWalkObservation is going to happen inside the configuration screens. So let's go to the configure screen and then to targeted comments. Now for this one, let's take a look at a rubric put out by the Center of Education for Leadership. This is actually a rubric for observing or monitoring principals, but the premise still applies. If it's teachers or principals, the idea, of course, is to use a rubric that you have on paper form and to get that rubric into iWalkObservation, in this case, targeted comments. So you'll remember when we first took a look at targeted comments, I had 4 lists. Each one of those lists was one of the domains that is used here in Portland Public. We're going to create a new one. We're going to create this one. This is 4 dimensions of instructional leadership. And we're going to just focus in right here on vision. vision, mission, and learning. So that is what I want to put into my targeted comments. So I'm going to go ahead and add a list. We're going to call it, the blah, blah, blah. There it is. We're going to call it Center for Educational Leadership. That's going to be the name of my list. The email intro gets populated in there for you, but you can, of course, change that to read however you would like. You have the option of putting in a description of this targeted comment list. And then I have my 20 tasks per list. So on this first list, I actually should have called that vision, mission, and learning focused culture. This is really the title of the entire document, but I want to focus in on just one element. So I'm going to call it vision, mission. And now, same thing, I'm going to come over here and do my copy and paste. Now I am copying and pasting from a PDF, and sometimes what that does is it changes some of the spacing or pagination from it, and you can see that that's happening here. When I copy it over, I just copied that and copied over, I'm losing some spacing here, and that's fine. It's still easier than retyping the whole thing. I just need to give it some spaces where those spaces got eliminated. Sometimes this happens when copying from a PDF document. Don't know why. Okay, let's just do a couple more here. Actions to the vision, mission. All right. So right now, again, I have the vision and mission here. I have 2 of the elements, and let's go ahead and add in one more. So with targeted comments, remember that each topic is its own list. With 4x20, the domains or the topics are inside one list. So there's 4 domains inside a list, and targeted comments, one list for each list. So let's add another one, and we're going to call it improvement. I'm just doing this quickly, improvement. And again, I can change the email intro how I'd like, but I would simply start copying my pieces. Oops. Okay, I'm not going to fix that for now because I'm just trying to demonstrate that process. So let's go back to the main page of iWalkObservation and take a look at targeted comments. Of course, I would select my teacher, and I would select the list I'd like. Here are those 4 domains that I showed you earlier. Again, those were auto-entered based off of a rubric, based off of a whole teacher's evaluation rubric, which is based off of Charlotte Danielson's work. And here are the 2 that I just added: the improvement and, of course, the vision. Now, remember that with targeted comments, the difference is that your narrative comment is directly in line with the element. So if we take a look right here, I've got my improvement page and my up to 20 elements. Here's my first one. If I notice evidence of it, I would type in the evidence that I am seeing directly to that element. Okay. I'll show you that again, just in case we can take a look at, let's say we go to something as robust as Charlotte Danielson's rubric. We go to planning, prep, and curriculum, and I apologize, hold on. There we are. And we notice that we have knowledge of the learning process. Maybe that's through a conversation or a meeting that we have. We would tick that box and write the narrative comment to later review and with the teacher themselves. Now, let's take a look at what, I'm going to just tick off a few and write some comments. This comment is great. Back to here, knowledge of the learning process, students demonstrate. Okay, And then the reason why I'm doing this is so that you can take a look at what the teacher will receive. When the teacher, I just simply clicked on preview. When the teacher receives this feedback, they're going to, of course, receive that introduction blurb right there. It's going to tell us who it's to, who it's from, what the date and time of that observation was. And then it'll give you that targeted comment list. So here's the name of that list. Here's the description of the list. And then here are the elements that I ticked. So remember, I ticked knowledge of learning process, and then I entered in a narrative comment, students demonstrate, etc. I ticked learning activities, and I had no comments, so there's nothing there, etc. So you can see that. It does, of course, have a narrative comment box, and I, of course, can use that to elaborate and provide more narrative feedback from my observation. All right. So if you have any questions, put those up there in the last few minutes here, just to kind of remind or think of the differences. 4x20 provides you with 4 domains. Each domain has 20 elements or targets or standards, however your rubric language, whatever your rubric language is that you use. The 4x20 and the targeted comments used to be called 60 comments. If you've been using iWalkObservation for a while, it is now called targeted comments as of about 1.5 years ago. 4x20, again, 4 domains, 20 targets per domain. It is really about evidence of seeing it, but not a lot about narrative comments back to each element. Targeted comments is exactly what it says. It is the targeted comment to the target or to the standard. And in targeted comments, we have a list. That list has up to 20 elements. Those lists are really those based off of a single domain, and it really allows you to focus in. All right. As I was promised or promising a few folks that I see that are online now, I would take a look at a couple other features in the very end or the last couple minutes of our webinar today. The one thing I wanted to look at is the Up Next. Up Next is a add-on tool that came to iWalkObservation about 1 year ago. It is a great tool for you to kind of track who it is that you have observed in your building of late and whose classroom you need to step into. I know as a school principal walking around in those hallways, you have 5-10 minutes here and you're ready to walk into a classroom. You don't always remember exactly whose classroom you visited in the last week, 2 weeks, or even the last month, and Up Next is intended to help you with that. So let's take a quick look at Up Next. Tap into the box, and the first thing that you want to do with Up Next is set it up. And you can see here it says 0 teachers are waiting to be observed. Select to add teachers manually. So if I want to add, oh, I really need to get into Glenn's room and I really need to get into Melvin's room, I can add them. I can think about that at the beginning of my week and add those teachers that I really would like to get into. Or one of my favorite features is just simply saying, I'd like to add all of those teachers whose classroom I have not been in the last 7 days. And there we go. These are all of the teachers who I have not visited in the last 7 days. Perhaps I want to do that for the last 14 days or the last 28 days. I can clear my list at any time. I can also, and again, remember that what it's doing is it is looking back into your observations and making some, putting the teachers on your list that have not been visited in the designated time. I can move any of these teachers up and down the list, but most important for me is I can move somebody to the very top. And as I'm looking through here, I say, oh yes, Miss Smith, I really need to see her this week, and I have a lot of folks on my list. I'm going to move her to the very, very top, and then she's going to be right there on my top. I can remove teachers, of course, from my list, reorder them, and simply say, okay, it's time to visit Dave Jennings and click on Observe Now. And you'll notice that it brought me to the main menu. It looks a little bit differently because we've already selected the teacher. And so now I simply need to select my tool. Maybe I'm going to use 4x20. And we notice that Dave Jennings has already been put into the teacher spot. So that's a quick dive at Up Next. Pretty useful in walking around the building and trying to remember who it is that you need to meet with. What I do like about Up Next is that I can recreate these lists at any time. So I don't have to follow it completely to kind of the linear 1, 2, 3, but I can clear it and recreate it. And that list is always going to be built off of the folks that I have seen most recent, excluded from that list. So there we are. Just reading a couple questions. A great question about teacher goals, and I'll take a couple minutes to do that. The question is how would we add teacher goals? We are at that time of the year, and indeed, we certainly are. Here we are in the fall, new school year, and writing our teacher goals. The thing I love about teacher goals that can be added to iWalkObservation is they truly help me as a principal to really focus my comments and really focus my observation and narrative notes on the goals themselves, which of course is going to help me when I write the evaluation. But most importantly, right, is that that's going to be giving really targeted feedback to my teachers on the areas that they may have written a goal on, an area that I may have written a goal or had a part of writing a goal with them on, and really focus them on that continual improvement work. So the teacher goal, let's take a look. If I go into teacher goals, it's going to show me all of the goals that I have in my system. I can add as many goals for any one teacher as I would like. And you can see I've got two dummy goals here, or example goals that we actually put in at the last webinar for Erin. So if I wanted to add a goal, I would just simply go to the Add a Goal button. It's going to ask me for who do I want to add that goal. Let's add a goal for Joe Clark. Now it's going to bring me to the goal page. I am going to write the goal statement. And in this case, we might want to explore why it's a SMART goal. That will help us clearly identify the goal, make sure that our goal is written in a way that is measurable, that is achievable and relevant. If you don't use SMART goals, or if you use something else, you can change the title of this box and use that comment box for any other descriptor of the goal that you would like. Now, I'll talk about the notes in just a minute. Let's go back to the goals, and you can see that my Joe Clark goal is now there. Let's add one more for Joe. Let's say that he has 2 of them. This is Joe's second goal. Again, my statement, a descriptor, in this case, a SMART goal, or why it is SMART, and there's my goal again. What is great about getting these goals into iWalkObservation is now, when I'm walking around the school and I pull up the Noticings and Wonderings tool, and I walk into Joe's classroom, you'll notice that this icon just appeared, and that is because we have 2 goal statements for Joe. So I know that as I'm walking around my building with 20, 30 teachers, there's no way I'm going to remember everybody's goal statements. This allows me to walk into that classroom, take a quick look at their goal. I can't edit in this box, and it's not intended to be, but take a quick look at their goal and then really zero in on the feedback that I'm giving them. I'd say that I would take a look at the notes on the goals. iWalkObservation has the ability to take long-term notes on goals. And so here is Joe's goal about writing a goal statement. I can take a note. That note, of course, is going to be dated. This might be a note about a meeting we had. It might be a note about progress that he's made, whatever that note goal would be. I can take, of course, multiple notes over time. With these notes, if it's time for my observation of Joe, I'm sorry, if it's time for my evaluation of Joe, and I really want to grab all of those notes that I've taken over time, I can send that to myself. So when I press on that send button, it is actually going to send just a summary of all of these notes to the observer, that would be me, not to the teacher. Okay, all right. Just looking to see if there are any other questions. It is great to see so many folks online today. If you have any questions, anything that happened, anything that raised additional questions for you today, please email me. My email is kevinc, Kevinc, at iWalkObservation. We have another webinar. There are 4 webinars in this fall series. This is number 2. The next webinar, I believe, is October 22nd, I think. But I will send those out by email. I look forward to seeing you all then. It's 3 weeks from now. And otherwise, have a fabulous Wednesday morning. And thanks so much for joining. Take care.